already, here's the deal. Cuppa Anime Joe, which is actually going to be Cuppa Manga Joe right now, because we're talking about One Piece, and specifically the One Piece manga, might be making a comeback. And this is really just because, like I just love One Piece, and I want to talk about it, and I really actually want to talk about it while it is still in serialization, because that is not something that I will always be able to do. But I also, one, don't feel super comfortable using panels from the manga in the editing, and like a big part of why I originally started doing this, and you might see that I went for a little bit about a year ago, and then it just kind of stopped, is because this would actually be my second YouTube channel. I have Cup of Science Joe, which is my main YouTube channel, and I put a lot of work in over there. But sometimes, like, I just want to sit down in front of the camera and just yap, you know, and just talk about something that I really care about, and not have to do, like, a ton of research and a ton of writing and a ton of editing. And so my goal for this whole project, for, you know, trying to talk about One Piece again, is to give myself a simpler type of video that I can just keep practicing on, and like just talk about things sometimes and get even more used to being in front of the camera than I already am. So if you were one of the like 6 people who watched me when I first did this and you liked the panels being there, I'm gonna apologize right now, because that made the editing so much more, like, so much longer, and because I don't feel super comfortable with putting them on YouTube to begin with. These are mostly just gonna be talking head videos, where it's just me, whoever's watching, and the GOAT Oda's One Piece chapters. So we're actually going to start with 1155. You might see me look up here. I actually have the chapter right behind my camera, so I can kind of just reference things from the chapter and go through what I want to talk about. So to begin with, we have Loki, and he is about to learn a very important lesson. So at the end of the last chapter, which I read but I won't have talked about, Rox comes to Elbaf, and he encounters Loki, and he's like, "All right, boy, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and you better say yes to both of them." And he asks Loki, "Is this Elbaf, and is King Harold here?" So picking up on this chapter, Loki answers both the questions. He says, "Yes, this is Elbaf, but my dad is not here because he's on an expedition." And this gives Rox an idea. He's like, "Oh, okay. You're Harold's kid, are you? So what you're going to do, because you can get a hold of him, right, is you're going to call him up, and you're going to tell him that you're in trouble, and that he needs to rush back to Elbaf right away." And so now this next part's pretty sad, because Loki does not think that he doesn't understand the way the world works yet. He hasn't really interacted with humans, but more importantly, he has not met a human that is just simply more powerful than pretty much any giant, which Roxy Zebek, as we're going to see later in this chapter, it probably is just that. And so Loki backtalks a little bit, but he also just purely does not believe at all that his father would come home even if he was in trouble. So Rox, I kind of applaud Rox here, right? He doesn't want to kill Loki, but he's like, "All right, well, look, if you're not going to follow what I say, then I am just going to bring it into fruition." And so Loki gets hit below the belt with a nut tap. It hurts just looking at it. And Rox is like, "Look at that. Now, Loki, you've gone and actually gotten wounded. You're going to have to call Harold back now." And so we'll come back to this later because we then skip to an even earlier part in the Rock's flashback, which is during the reverie. And this scene is killer. Like, Rock's, he is that guy. Like, he is. Rock's is that guy. He is chilling like a villain. I had to do it. In the flower room. How many people have we actually seen in the flower room? It is, like, besides just Emu and his attendant, I mean, that might be it. I could be wrong here, but I'm not even sure if the Gorosei have ever been in the flower room. So Rox is chilling, and a girl who looks very suspiciously like Gunko is in the flower room with Emu. So, Emo, Limo, Emo, Emu, Moo. Can't talk today. So there's a really good chance that, like, Gunko's been around for a lot longer than we might think, or than we maybe originally thought. And, you know, with how long the Gorosei remained at their ages, this is certainly not impossible for Emu. So the narrator comes on, Hunter x Hunter style, and he tells us that Rox describes himself as a worshiper of Davy Jones. So Davy Jones is very possibly a real historical character at some point in the past of One Piece. But he did not say anything else because he knew there was nothing he could do. So this is, like, such a badass scene, because Rox, it's also, like, crazy Emu hype, right? Because Rox is that guy. We actually learn later on that he killed an admiral, which people don't die in One Piece, so it's wild that he straight up killed an admiral. But he also knew, like, Luffy would never do this. Luffy would fight no matter what. Zebek, we almost get to see a little bit of maybe where Blackbeard's calculation came from, like here, because Zebek reached Emu, knew that there was a ruler of the world, also knew there was nothing he could do about it in that moment, which is crazy. I'm not sure how to put it, the willpower, like, to be able to do that is pretty wild, right? Like, to be that strong, but to also recognize, look, here's the deal. I can't do anything right now, but he does leave Emu with a warning, saying, I will be back. So somehow, Rox is in a fight he knows that he can't win, so he's going to withdraw. But it also feels like he comes out on top of the confrontation, which is absolutely crazy to me. And so we leave the flower room. Harold is on fire. I don't know what Harold was thinking, how he thought it would be a good idea for him, a ancient giant, to get smuggled in to the Holy Land. I don't know what he was thinking. Crazy. But he got labeled. So we also learned, it might have been in the previous chapter, again, I'm kind of picking up fresh here, but it might have been in this chapter too, that Rox kidnapped 5 kings. 5 kings from the Reverie. Harold is getting the heat for that, literally, and they call him the King Abductor. I think the TCB said King Napper, and King Napper is way better of a term than King Abductor, but we got the official here, so that's what we're going on. And of course he's like, no, that wasn't me, but, you know, like, what he's talking to Celestial Dragons, they want him because he's exotic. They don't necessarily care what he does or does not say. He sees Rox. He sees Rox one time, and Harold's like, oh, that's the guy. He must be the one who kidnapped the kings. I'm not gonna be that fall guy. So this epic clash, Rox and Harold, Conqueror's hockey, blades are not touching at all. Black lightning out the wazoo. We don't see it split the skies, but you best believe it split something. I don't know if it was the clouds below the red line, or maybe it was a clear day, but if there was clouds there to be split, this clash did it. And the narrator tells us this clash between strangers eradicated any sign of others for 5 kilometers, which is a really big distance for a clash to totally clear out. And so immediately these two, they're like on the same wavelength, right? They're like, all right, this guy, he knows what he's doing. So we get an introduction, Rox and Harold, and this is the moment where these two meet, right? We're seeing a little bit of setup for what's going to come later in terms of the first interaction that Harold had with Rox. So Rox basically tells Harold to direct his blow kind of towards the Holy Land so that they can create an opportunity to escape. And this totally happens, right? Harold asks which way is Elbath, and Rox points and says the New World is that way, and Harold, the mad lad, jumps off the red line. No climbing, nothing like that. He just leaps right off the red line, and so obviously just lands right in the water. I guess that's what you get to do when you are an ancient giant. And this gets Rock's first wanted poster, which looks really similar to Buggy's wanted poster. Buggy is Rox's son confirmed. Nothing like that, but I have seen a lot going around lately about a relation, like an actual familial relationship between Buggy D. Clown and Rox D. Zebek. And so he clearly gets like a huge bounty here. We can't see it, but I mean, you don't enter the Holy Land, reach the Flower Room, meet Emu, escape, some of that would not be reported on, of course, and kill an admiral, and then get out of the Holy Land. You do not do all of those things and not get a killer bounty. So, I mean, I would have to say he's coming in swinging at least around 3 bill. At least around 3 bill for that. Maybe if they want to lowball it and kind of cover up some of what he did because people don't know about Emu, people don't know about the Flower Room, you know, maybe like 2.5, but I'm going with 3. And so at this point, Rox changes. So up until now, Rox had been almost exclusively focused on the world government, but he changes his targets to include pirates as well. My guess is that after meeting Emu, he kind of had more of an idea of what exactly it would take for him to go up against Emu and actually topple him. And to do that, he needed to gather a crew. To me, this kind of seems like when he invaded the Holy Land, he was a solo player, which is insanity, completely unheard of. We'd never seen anything like that before. But he probably figured out in that confrontation, right, that he needs more strong pirates with him. And so we get some Foxy hype, some long ring, long land vindication, if you will. And we kind of knew this because of the association between the Davy Back fights and Pirate Island. But Rox uses the Davy Back fights to build up the Rox pirates. This was kind of like a theory that's been around for a long time, and that he used the Davy Back fight to gather the Rox crew. But here we get a complete confirmation of it, right? So the strongest man of his era, except maybe Harold and possibly Roger. We don't know how strong Roger and Garp are at this point. Who knows? He could have been playing silly games just like Foxy, but at a much higher level, and toppling these pirate crews. And you know, he has wanted posters in one of the panels here, which means he knew going in what pirates off what crews he wanted to join him. So he's going around, Davy back fighting his way to the Rock's crew and just like plucking all the pirates that he wants. And so a little bit after this, we get him arriving at Elbaf, right? And here we get quite an impressive spread of all the current members of the Rock's Pirates. You got Shiki, you got Stussy, you got Wang Ji, who looks a lot like Caribou and Carbo. You got Edward Newgate, Whitebeard. And then there's Don Marlowe. There's one other guy who's a new addition, Don Marlowe. And then another character, I think his name's later. I don't see the names in this panel, and I don't quite remember right now. But we saw him on Thriller Bark, so we'll come back to him later. And Rox, of course, wants to recruit Harold because he knows, like, he clashed with him, so he's like, this guy is also him. I need him to join me. Okay, here we go. I should have just went to the next panel. So, yeah, Pirate Smuggler Gonzui is a character we saw as one of the zombies on Thriller Bark. And so, you got Golden Lion Shiki. Before he's Golden Lion Shiki, he's a mobster. Miss Buckingham Stussy. Don Marlin. I might have said Marlowe earlier, but it's Don Marlin. Edward Newgate. Wang Ji, and Pilot Smuggler Gonzui. Right, this is the crew right here. Don Marlin, Gangster of the West Blue, definitely or very highly a Capone Gang beige connection right there. So we move on. Harold's like, you're a criminal, Rox. I can't join you. Like, I have allies now. I have nations who are partnering with me. I just can't be affiliated with a guy like you. And so they have a little bit of a back and forth. You know, Rox really believes that Harold has not moved away from the bloodlust and the just enjoyment of battle that comes with being a giant, and especially with being an ancient giant. And he even says, you still got that blood in your veins, Harold. Even if you're playing diplomat right now, you've still got that battle fighting blood in your veins, and I cannot help but wonder if this is going to come back sometime in the future. And so Rox talks about his ambitions, completely wild, that he wants to topple the world government and be the king of the world. Harold's like, you're making an enemy out of the entire world. It's too much to handle, and we already kind of knew that Rox was going to do that. And at some point, Harold also tells the rest of Rox's crew, like, you know, you shouldn't follow this guy. He's going to lead you way in the bad direction. And they all laugh. They're like, here's the deal. We don't care about Rox and his crazy ideals. Look, if he died, like, we're all free. We are not here because we want to be. We are here purely out of obligation. So a downside to the way Rox gathered his crew is that they just don't have like any loyalty to him, and this is surely going to play a role later to the downfall of Rox that we know happens. And so they kind of tell Harold, like, listen, man, we don't really care what happens to Rox, so if he dies, we'd probably even be happier. And so then, now we're at the end of the chapter, where Rox kind of talks about his upcoming plans, which is going to include taking over the pirate island, because again, it might be in the last chapter or it might be in this chapter. I'm kind of mixing them up because I reviewed both of them before this, but very quickly. We learned that the pirate island has a large amount of resources and money that Rox is going to claim for himself, and this is how he's going to really kickstart the Rox Pirates activities. And so he says, like, yeah, he's gonna get a rule over Full Island, here it is, and take control of all the pirates there, not going with his plan on recapturing it for the world government, which I think is something he had offered to them. Nah. He's going to take it for himself. And he says, this is just the prologue to my life. With that island as my base, I will be the king of the world. And we might have Rox's Bartolomeo here in Loki, because Loki has a huge smile on his face. He's like crying tears. He's got the snot coming out. He is enamored by Rox. And we know from some of the other things that Loki has said that he definitely looks up to Rox, and he's unhappy about the fact that Rox was killed. And he tried to join Rox's crew probably more than once, but just wasn't old enough for Rox to really take him. And so this is it right here. This is the formative moment for Loki where Rox D. Zebek becomes his inspiration. And so we'll definitely see where this goes later. It says 4 years later, after Harold ignored repeated invitations, Rox finally carried out his plan, and the formidable lineup that joined him caused the world to quake in terror. So even without Harold, we know that the Rox crew was still full of absolute monstrosities and heavy hitters. So there's like they were described as the most dangerous pirate crew to have ever existed, and we're seeing the signs of that here. So this turned out to be a good length. It was fun to just like sit down and yap, and I certainly am gonna make an effort of trying to do this more. You know, the next chapter comes out in 4 days for the official, and maybe I'll wait for that, but I think we'll probably have the TCB tomorrow. So, you know, I got other video projects that I'm working on that I do need to focus attention to, but I will definitely be making an attempt to come back for 1156. And I know there hasn't been any activity on this channel for a while, so it'll be nice to get something back up. And if you made it this far, thank you. I hope you enjoyed, and I would like you to have an excellent rest of your day.